One thing that we do know is that cats in general have evolved an immune system that is more robust when it comes to fighting off these diseases. And second, and this is the key, cats are very, very clean. They're very good groomers. So one of the things that protects cats against tick-borne disease is if a tick gets on them, they're usually going to find it and groom it off pretty quickly.
Join us for a chat with the experts as we help and encourage you to share in a life of adventure with your cat. Remember, no adventure is too big or too small. We can't wait to learn, grow, and explore with you. Hello, and welcome to the Kitty Cat Go Adventure Podcast, where we discuss various topics related to traveling and adventuring with your cat. I'm your host, Emily Hall, and today I am chatting with Jonathan Weber about tick safety and prevention. Though perhaps not the most glamorous of topics, it is an important one and something we all must consider as we adventure outdoors with our cats. Jonathan founded TickCheck tick testing in 2014 while studying at university after seeing firsthand the dangers of tick-borne disease when his father came down with Lyme disease. After winning first place in a statewide business competition, TickCheck went on to provide tick testing services and tick remover products to tens of thousands of people and their pets around the world. When not working on his business, Jonathan enjoys traveling the world and spending time with his cat, nieces, and nephews. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Emily, thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here tonight. I know ticks is, they are a very big nuisance for me down here in Georgia. In fact, I just went on a hike with my cats last weekend, and even still this late in the year, still came back with ticks.
Yep. And a couple years ago, I would have been very surprised to hear you say that because ticks have been seen as kind of a Northeast problem, and they're getting further and further south and into places they haven't been before. And usually by November, we've just about seen the last of them, but that isn't the case these past few years either.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that it was mostly Northeast. Because as far as I can remember, it's always been a problem down here in Georgia. And so I always think of it as a Southern problem.
Yeah, and I guess everybody has their own tick species. So we have up here in the Northeast, we're kind of deer tick central. Deer ticks, as you know, carry Lyme disease, and they go further and further south. I know we have seen deer ticks that are coming up from Georgia and from the south, but previously we didn't get that many sent in.
Yeah. So you're in the Northeast?
Yep. Yeah. So we're in Pennsylvania right now, and that's for better or worse. It's kind of ground zero for ticks and Lyme disease. So that's more or less what led me into this business.
Yeah. So tell us a little about yourself and TickCheck. I know I mentioned it briefly in your bio at the beginning, but can you share a little bit more about what you do and how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a background in tech. I studied computer science, but I've always been someone who enjoyed spending time in the outdoors. We've always had pets. We've always spent time hiking, gardening, camping, and doing that in Pennsylvania. Or anywhere where you get ticks, you're going to come across ticks very frequently. My parents always told me when I was little and I would come in from the woods, don't forget to do a tick check. So you can see where the name came from.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I saw my dad go through the experience of catching Lyme disease, which is terrible. He's luckily recovered from it since then, but he had a really, really rough experience with it. And I learned that technology exists. There's a laboratory in my university that could test ticks for Lyme disease and tell you, whether or not you were exposed. And I wondered why this wasn't available to the public. And TickCheck was the result, of finding out how can I make this available for the public. That was in 2014. So we won a business plan competition, and we've taken it since then, and we've been able to help tens of thousands of people, around the country test their ticks to find out if they were exposed to tick-borne disease. So that's where it's taken me since then.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sorry to hear about your dad's experience, but that's great that he's recovered. How long did his illness last?
So there were at least a couple months where he had serious trouble getting out of bed, and it was very serious. He had aches and pains, and all the symptoms that you hear people who have really really severe cases of Lyme. And I know a lot of those symptoms lasted for some years afterwards, and
Oh.
he was lucky that he's more or less completely recovered. I talk to people on a regular basis as a part of being involved in this business, who are telling me about symptoms that last years or a lifetime. you know
Mm.
People are telling me that they're experiencing aches and pains and all these symptoms that they've never had let up even after decades. So that's something that's seriously concerning, obviously, for Lyme disease. And then again, when you're thinking about pets, both dogs and cats, can also get Lyme disease. Luckily, some studies have shown that for some pets it's less severe because they're able to fight it off better than we are. But obviously they can't talk, so we don't know what their long-term experiences are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I know cats and dogs are really good at masking when they're sick, and
Mhm.
by the time a lot of times we realize that they're sick, it means that they're super sick.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you've mentioned Lyme disease. I know ticks can also carry other kinds of diseases, and there are other dangers associated with them. What are some of the other dangers?
So, well, there is a really long list, and that's what the fantastic scientists in our lab have been doing, is adding the capacity to test for more and more tick-borne diseases. We
Mhm.
test for about 30 different pathogens at this point, and there are
Wow.
a lot more that are, becoming known, less well known. So it ranges everywhere from, something like Bartonellosis, which is really common and relatively mild, all the way to something like Powassan virus, which is so severe that it will kill a person in weeks. And then there's also other tick-borne. I guess you wouldn't call them illnesses, but you could call it a side effect. So a lot of people have heard recently about alpha-gal syndrome, which is otherwise known as the red meat allergy. So this isn't actually a bacteria. It's not a virus. It's not something that can actually be tested for in a tick. It's a it's an allergy that you get by being bitten by a tick that fed on certain kind of animals before you, and it caused you to actually be allergic to red meat. And it remains to be seen if pets are susceptible to that, which would be, I think, a much worse result for them. But it's
Mhm.
something that's been growing in concern over the last few years, especially in the South, where the Lone Star tick is found.
Oh, so are they the ones most commonly carrying that,
Yep. Yeah,
whatever
it's
causes
the
that allergy?
yeah the Lone Star tick is associated with alpha gal.
Wow. That's a weird one for sure. I actually know someone, who has that.
Mhm. Yeah, and there are tests now that can confirm whether or not you had it. They didn't even have it before. So people would one day just start getting sick when they ate meat, and nobody, doctors included, would be able to tell them why. And eventually, it became more commonly known that it's yet another tick-borne infection. And I don't think we're done seeing new tick-borne infections and side effects. Even Lyme disease is relatively new. It's only been around for maybe 40 years,
Wow.
and nobody really knows how it started. They know it started around the town of Lyme, Connecticut, which is where the name came from. But there's all kinds of theories about whether or not it was something that sprung up organically. Was it something that came out of some kind of a laboratory testing program? But either way, it popped up, and it's here to stay, and it's been growing. Like if you look at the reports of cases of Lyme that are reported by the CDC, it's growing by a massive amount every single year, and that's just reported cases. There's so many cases, especially actually all with pets. There's no central reporting case for pet Lyme cases, where a lot of this goes unreported, and especially with these co-infections, these other tick-borne infections, a
Mhm.
lot of them are so relatively obscure. There's not even a way for doctors to specifically test for them. So tick testing is one of the only ways in those situations to determine that you were exposed to one of these less common tick-borne diseases as opposed to, just having a weird case of Lyme disease or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the subject of testing humans and pets and how a lot of cases of Lymes and stuff don't go reported in pets, can you test cats and dogs for Lyme? Is there a test for that?
Yeah, yeah. So there are tests for Lyme disease. It's the exact same method as you use for testing humans. It's a Western blot blood test or an ELISA test, which tests for antibodies. So there was a product that we were aware of in the past that was actually an at-home blood test. I don't know if there's anything like that still on the market where you just kind of do a little prick and then you can test. Something that's important to know when you're doing Lyme disease tests is that when you do certain types of blood tests, especially the ELISA test, which tests for the presence of antibodies, if the subject has ever had Lyme disease before, you may have a positive result.
Hmm.
So what that means is, it's not good at telling you that, there's an active infection right now. It can give you a false positive. The Western blot is the more industry standard, the more reliable test to tell you if there's an active infection going on. So these are available for both people and pets.
Yeah. Interesting. I recognize those the names of those tests because I have a cat that has FIV, and those are the same tests that they do to test for that as well. So that's interesting to me that that same test, I guess, tests for a
Yeah,
lot of.
it's the testing mechanism. It's not necessarily the test itself.
Oh,
So
okay.
you would use Western blot just to determine, the presence of the bacteria in the
Mm,
bloodstream. So it could be used to test for, like the other feline diseases as well. It would just be a different testing process.
okay. Okay. Getting my science lesson for the day. So are there diseases that cats are more prone to getting from ticks? I know you mentioned they can get Lyme disease, but
Mhm.
a lot of times it goes unnoticed or they at least their symptoms aren't always as severe. Are there some that are more of a concern?
So the hard the hard answer to this is that there's not a lot of research that's out there about this. So there is a lot of research, on humans and Lyme, for instance. But when you're talking about some of the newer co-infections, like for instance, the Powassan virus, this is so new that human studies only started coming out within the past few years, and in many cases, there is actually nothing that tells you, how this affects cats. One thing that we do know is that cats in general have evolved an immune system that is more robust when it comes to fighting off these diseases. And second, and this is the key, cats are very, very clean. They're very good groomers. So one of the things that protects cats against tick-borne disease is if a tick gets on them, they're usually going to find it and groom it off pretty quickly. So the way that this helps, it's important to know that if a tick is on you, just because it bites you doesn't mean you've immediately contracted disease. Uh,
Hmm.
you have to have that tick attached to you for a certain amount of time. And for different diseases, it needs to be, sometimes a very significant amount of time. So
Mm,
for Lyme disease, for there to be a significant risk of infection, the tick should be on you for 20 to 40 or more hours.
okay.
That's when you see what's called full engorgement. And the reason it takes so long is because the Lyme disease bacteria is actually relatively large as far as bacteria go, and ticks' mouth parts are so small, it actually takes that long for enough bacteria to physically get from the tick into the host.
Hmm.
So what that means is there's a couple things that you can do to protect yourself and your pet if you do find a tick. So the first is make sure that you do regular checks. If you have, an active cat who can groom themselves, they're usually going to do a pretty good job. But often there are places where cats can't reach, like at the nape of their neck,
Mhm.
on their back, on their head, and on their ears. So you want to check those areas in case there's any ticks that the cat didn't catch. Second, if you find a tick, you need to be careful to remove it properly. If you remove a tick in the wrong way and you squeeze it, you're basically injecting yourself or the cat with whatever bacteria is inside that tick. So you need to be careful to remove it in a way that does not squeeze the tick and cause it to regurgitate into the wound. And if you do this, you're going to be minimizing the chance of transmission.
Yeah. Man, I didn't realize about the length of time. That's a relief.
Yep.
Because whenever I, go hiking, in fact, a few months back, I went on a hike, and I mean, no joke, I came home with probably 20 ticks, and I was pulling them off of me even the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, I got them out. Their bites are so itchy. I mean, that to me is the worst part. You have this itchy bite that lasts for like a week. But at least I know that amount of time was probably not enough to have gotten
So,
infected.
so there are other diseases like Powassan virus that can be transmitted faster. There's actually, again, there's not a lot of research about a lot of these smaller, more niche diseases,
Yeah.
but we do know that there are co-infections that can be transmitted faster than Lyme. But in general, the faster you get a tick off, the lower the likelihood of transmission. And if you get a tick off within a few minutes, the likelihood of anything is very low. So
Yeah.
that's one of cats specifically. That's one of their best shields against getting these diseases. The fact that they're very, very clean and they groom themselves, and that's a big difference between cats and dogs. Dogs do not groom themselves as well, and usually when you have a dog, you're going to find that the tick stays on there for 48 hours, 72 hours until it gets so big and swollen that it just drops off. And
Oh.
that's why dogs are actually at much higher risk of Lyme than cats are, not even necessarily because they're physically more subject to it. It's just because they don't have that grooming ability that cats have.
Yeah. So if a cat is grooming themselves and finds a tick and eats it, is there a danger in that?
Not really.
Okay.
It's, you get the disease by having this go into your bloodstream. So I wouldn't want my cat to eat
Yeah.
uh, engorged ticks, but better that than getting bit by them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's like I'm just wondering if, they're grooming themselves when they get back from a hike and you don't realize they've eaten it. So
Yeah.
that's good to know that's not a concern.
Well, one other thing too is when they groom them, if the ticks go off, like if they groom ticks off and then they fall off in your house, they'll live in there for weeks.
Oh,
So yeah, so ticks might only take one blood meal, in a couple of months.
wow.
So they're very hard to kill. They can live without food or water for an absurd amount of time. And we have people who send us. We literally receive hundreds of ticks a day sent to us from all corners of the United States. And people send them in bottles. People send them in little bags, and most of them show up alive, even
Oh my
after
gosh.
spending days or even weeks, sitting in people's drawers or being mailed to us.
Oh,
So
oh.
that's one thing to note is that when your cat comes in, it's always better for you to groom them for ticks because then at least you know that the ticks are being disposed of and not walking around somewhere.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, because
Ooh.
if they're still walking around in your house, they will be looking for someone or something else to hop onto, even though it's not as easy for them to do that in a house environment as is to the outside. So the way ticks will get on you is they're going to do what's called questing. They're going to climb up, so like a blade of grass or a twig. They're going to sit on the end and then they're going to wave their little legs out until somebody brushes against them, and then they'll grab on. And they can detect carbon dioxide. So that's how they detect
Mm.
breathing animals, and they'll go after something like that. But if they're in a house, they don't really have that many options to climb up on and reach out and grab you. But they'll still try, and they'll be in there for weeks. So you don't want to give them that chance.
Yeah, that's really gross.
Yes. This is a very gross business. I like to tell people that I literally have blood-filled arachnids being sent to me on a daily basis, and that's what I do for a living.
Yeah. Well, definitely not glamorous, but important.
Yep.
It's good
Yep.
to know that the service is available and
Yep.
what you do is, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very, very
And
important.
we're really happy to provide it because we help a lot of people, and we have a surprisingly large percentage of people who are sending in ticks have pulled them off of their pets. This is something that when I started this business, I didn't expect. I thought if you were going to be, paying for this laboratory service, it was going to be on your kid or on yourself. And that's the case. But, close to half of the ticks that people send us have come off of their pets because, people care so much about their pets. And,
Hmm.
on top of that, there's no way for them to ask their pet, hey, when did you get this tick on you? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
So we're really happy we're able to help pet owners.
Are you a cat adventurer looking for a sense of community, extra motivation to get out and do more, and ways to strengthen that bond between you and your cat? Or maybe something to challenge you to push the boundaries of cat expectations? Take your adventuring to the next level in our Trailblazers membership community, where I provide monthly challenges and activities designed to give you that extra push as well as fresh ideas of things to do with your cat. Trailblazers is made up of cat adventurers from all over the world, some just getting started and some with years of experience, all ready to give you support and encouragement, share in your victories and struggles, and help you and your cat reach your goals. You'll find yourself right at home amongst your tribe. Learn more at kittycatgo.com/trailblazers. You mentioned how ticks attach themselves and that they can live in your house for months without food. What is the lifespan of a tick? What is the life cycle of a tick? What is that like?
So ticks generally go through, you have kind of two generations in a yearly basis, and ticks go through a multi-stage life cycle. So they start as tick larvae, and they're so tiny you're never going to see one. They're never going to bite you, because they don't feed at that stage. From the larva stage, they turn into nymphs. uh, Nymphs are kind of the most dangerous stage of tick, and that's because they are so tiny that they're almost impossible to see, and they do feed at that stage. So a nymph tick is going to be smaller than the tip of this pen. It's going to be as small as the head of a pin in many
Yes.
cases.
That's
uh,
interesting you mentioned that. I actually, the hike that I mentioned where I got a bunch of ticks, several of them
Mhm.
were so small. When I pulled them off, at first I was like, "Is this a speck of dirt?" And
Yep.
then I realized, like, I had to I felt like I needed a magnifying glass, and I realized it was a tick.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. And sometimes people send us ticks, and I wonder how on earth did they even see that? How did they even find that? It's so small that I'm barely able to see it.
Yeah.
So something to know about the life cycle is that you have nymphs are going to start showing up usually around April of each year, and they're going to be peaking in around June. So June is around the time when ticks in general peak, both adults and nymphs. Those nymphs that peak in June are then going to become adults later in the fall, so October and November. So you
Mm,
kind of have two peaks in the tick season, and this is actually very useful information.
yeah.
We can see this on a day-to-day basis, and after seeing what I've seen, there are a couple weeks at the end of May and the beginning of June, I just don't go hiking because
Yeah.
I know if I do, I'm literally going to come back covered in ticks. And I know that if I wait a couple weeks, the risk is going to die down significantly. So basically, it's all going to start in March and April. You're going to start to get first year adults, that have they basically slept underneath the snow and underneath the leaves. They're going to then wake up and start looking for food. The next generation of nymphs is going to show up by the end of May, beginning of June. And then again in September, October, November, you're going to have another batch of adults. And those guys are going to disappear if you're in a colder climate once the first snows come in. So when that happens, then you're done with ticks for the year.
So, do they die during the winter or they just like hibernate?
So the answer to that is it depends.
Okay.
And so you would think if you have a lot of snow, that's going to result in all of your ticks dying, and then you're going to have fewer ticks next year.
Mhm.
Actually, if you have a lot of snow, that protects the ticks. They're insulated and they hibernate under the snow, under the leaves, and then they're going to pop out again in the spring, and you're going to have an especially heavy spring and summer tick season.
Mm,
If you have an especially warm winter, like we've been having recently, that's
yeah.
going to result in more ticks surviving. The one thing that does kill them is if you have a super cold winter and you don't have a lot of snow, that's going to kill off a lot of ticks, and you're going to have lower tick risk that upcoming season.
So a cold, dry winter is what we want.
Yes, yep. So that's what knocks the tick population down. But
Mm.
as things have been moving on, global warming, winters are getting milder, and especially warmer weather has been going further north, and we've seen tick populations have been getting larger and larger each year.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Definitely can tell a difference. Like, we're big hikers, and with cats, we always try to go to the more secluded spots where there's not a lot of people, not a lot of dogs, and unfortunately that means those trails are also maybe a little less maintained
Hmm.
and higher grasses, things like that. And so the ticks are just heavier. And I feel like our favorite little hiking spot that we go to, I can't remember the last time I went and didn't come back with ticks.
So another thing to keep in mind is that ticks also they follow hosts. So deer ticks, for instance, their favorite hosts are, like the name says, white-tailed deer. They also like mice. So if you're in an area where you see a lot of deer and a lot of mice live, there's going to be a lot of ticks in that area. So that's something else to keep in mind. And in years when you have a lot of deer, you're also going to have a lot of deer ticks.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that aspect of it. So speaking of deer ticks, there are lots of different kinds of ticks.
Yep.
How many different kinds are there, and are some of them more likely to carry diseases than others?
Yes, so there are four main species of tick in the United States, and I have a little chart I can show you here. So this is from one
Ooh.
of our tick removers. So you have on the, I guess it's the leftmost side, that is your deer tick. So this is not real size; they're much smaller than this. The deer tick is going to have a black front and a reddish back. That's the smallest tick, and that is the species of tick that carries Lyme disease. So you have a different species of deer ticks on the west coast. It's called the western blackleg tick. Looks similar, also carries Lyme. In the middle, you've got your Lone Star tick there. So the Lone Star tick is located across most of the US, but it's also very popular in the South. That one's easy to identify because you have a white dot right in the middle.
Yeah, I've
And
definitely seen that one.
yeah, so they're popular down in Georgia, Texas, all throughout the South, and those guys are a bit larger. And then on the right, that's your dog tick. So the dog tick is much larger. Those are the guys that are the easiest to see when they're adults, and they're like kind of mottled brown color. So those are the most common ticks that you're going to see in the U.S. And I can actually give you some data from TickCheck. So, out of all of our ticks that we have tested, deer ticks, 21% have come back positive for something. The Lone Star tick, 16% have come back positive for something. And the dog tick, about 3% have come back positive for something. So, based on that, the most risky kind of tick is the deer tick. And deer ticks also are associated with the most severe diseases like Lyme disease and Powassan virus.
Hmm. And you guys actually offer a service with TickCheck where you'll identify people's ticks if they send a picture, right?
Yep, absolutely. So you go to our website, tickcheck.com/identify, and you can upload a picture of your tick, and our lab techs will identify it for free and tell you what species it is. We also have the TickCheck app, which you can download on Google Play or the iPhone store, and you can also take pictures of ticks and upload them and get a free identification that way. And all the data that you send in, we use for research and tracking ticks as they spread across the US. So you're also contributing data to science.
Oh, well, that's good to know. I'm going to start taking pictures of all my ticks.
Yep. Send them all to us. We want tick pictures.
Yes. I just dropped the link in the comments. Everybody, TickCheck.com/identify. So if you want to bookmark that, so you can send all your tick pictures to Jonathan.
Yep, we're waiting for them.
Yes. Okay, so we've had some comments, some comments and questions come in. Patty is wondering if you have a tool you recommend for checking for ticks.
Sure. So for checking for ticks, we recommend, just use your eyes and use your fingers. Removing ticks, we do have a specific tool we would love to recommend, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So checking for ticks, when you're checking yourself, you're always going to want to look for areas where ticks are looking to settle. They're always looking to go into crevices or areas where like your waistband, areas where your clothes are in contact, because they're looking for somewhere where they think they're not going to be found, and they're going to be able to suck your blood for hours. So always check, like, your armpits, around your waist, your sock band, your hairline. These are all places where it's very common to find ticks. And the same thing with pets. They're going to be going into cracks and crevices, and especially with cats, you want to look in the places that they're not able to groom. So look in their neck, the back of their head, their back, anywhere that they can't reach, you can help make sure that they're tick free. So now when it comes to tick removal, obviously I have a preference for our tick remover kit.
Yes,
So
I have it. I'm trying. That's why I've been like rummaging in my bag here. I have your tick remover kit. It's great.
So
I can't find it, but I have it.
So you can get this on Amazon, and I'm sure Emily will drop a link. So the way that this works, and first I can tell you a little story about how we designed this. So we actually went out with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife when they do their annual bear tagging. So what they do is they go and they tranquilize bears, and then they weigh them, make sure they're healthy, take blood samples, they tag them. And I went out, tagged along with them, and took advantage of the fact that your average black bear has about 500 ticks on them at any given time, because they are not very good at grooming themselves. So we gave all the bears a free tick removal session, and we tested all sorts of different variations of tool and tweezer, and we came up with this set of tools. So what this is here is ultra fine tip tweezers. So, a lot of first aid kits have dull tweezers in them. It's a lot harder to take off ticks, especially really small ticks with this. And the way that you want to do it is you want to take your tweezers and you're going to grab the tick from the back around the mouth parts. You're going to grab the mouth parts. You're not squeezing the tick itself. You're not squeezing the tick's abdomen. And then you're going to pull straight out. So tools like this are excellent at removing really, really small ticks, especially nymphs and deer ticks. A tool like this, so this is a tick remover fork. So this is good for embedded ticks that are engorged, ticks that are a little bit larger. And what you want to do with a tool like this is you're going to slide it in again from the back. You're going to get the fork over the tick's mouth parts, and then you're going to lift it out completely. So the idea is, whatever tool you use, you need to get the tick by the mouth parts. You need to remove it completely and make sure that you don't leave any bits behind. So there are like some folk remedies that I'd like to warn you about. So my mom even told me this when I was growing up, put a cap of soap or alcohol or something over it and the tick will detach. So the tick will detach, but it will detach because it's drowning, and it's probably going to regurgitate in the wound before it does that. So you don't want to do that. Some people touch the tick with a lit match. You don't want to do that. That's also going to cause it to regurgitate. Don't grab it with your hands. There are some tools that recommend that you twist. Don't do that, because you'll break the mouth parts off and leave them inside the wound. So whatever you do, just make sure that you are grabbing the tick carefully and pulling it out completely.
Yeah. So, what are the risks if you don't get all the parts out?
So if you don't get the parts out, there is some risk that there were bits of saliva containing bacteria that you're then leaving inside you. So you're raising your risk of transmission. And then you're also just raising your risk of, a localized infection in the area because you're leaving a foreign body part inside. So kind of like leaving the bee stinger inside.
Hmm.
You just don't want to do it. So it can raise the risk of transmission, if it's a tick that's carrying disease. And, it's just in general to safely and completely remove the tick, you don't want to leave anything behind. But the most important part in terms of preventing transmission is to make sure that you remove it in a way that does not cause the tick to barf anything into the wound.
Yeah. So lots of questions coming in right now.
Mhm.
What about Vaseline? Patty's wondering about Vaseline.
So anything that you put on a tick to try to get it off, whether or not it works, and some of them do work, it's going to raise the risk that the tick is going to regurgitate into the wound, and you don't want to risk that. So, don't use essential oils, don't use Vaseline, don't use anything like that. It may get the tick off, but you're raising your risk for infection. Instead, use some kind of a tool to mechanically remove the tick and make sure that you're removing it completely.
Okay. So the only way to properly remove a tick is with proper removal tools.
Yes. Yep.
Well, that makes it easy. Not a lot of options.
Yep. But the good thing is, it's relatively easy. You
Yeah.
probably have, tweezers around your house. They will work in a pinch. You can, if you're in an area where you have a lot of ticks, you should have a tick removal tool handy, and you can use that. But a pair of tweezers will work in a pinch. As fine tipped as you can get, is going to make it easier to safely remove it.
Yes. Well, I have the TickCheck tick remover kit, and it is great. I have used it.
Excellent. How'd it work for you?
It worked great.
Excellent.
So Stephanie is wondering, if you accidentally break off the head, can you remove that somehow?
Yeah, you can. So you'll be able to tell if you look at the wound and you see like, a little black bit, or brown bit that's left inside. So you'd use something like this, these super fine tip tweezers to kind of go in there and pull it out. It's really hard to do it without something like that. It's kind of like, having a splinter or something that's in there. So at that point, there's I don't think there's any special technique to it. You just need to have something that's precise enough to go in and pull it out. But I've removed a lot of ticks, and if you're doing it properly, you're never gonna break the head off as long as you grab it in the right way and you pull it out. So you want to be using a slow, firm motion, and you want to be pulling it directly up, making sure that you're grabbing by the mouth parts, and you're not going to break it off.
Yeah. Hmm. Darren is wondering, would suction, like a vacuum storage food container, work to remove a tick?
To remove it, I mean, I've never heard that one before.
Mhm. Either.
I would be suspicious in anything that does anything to the tick that would cause it to potentially distress and regurgitate. I wouldn't risk it. There's super tried and true methods to remove ticks. So this is what the professionals do: is they use super fine tip tweezers or a tool. People who are like groomers who are removing hundreds of ticks. Some people, we get a lot of people who say that they went to the hospital or the urgent care to have a tick removed. That's not necessary. It's a $10 tool, and you can do it yourself. So if you're in an area where you see a lot of ticks, you should practice this, and you should know how to do it, and teach everybody, teach your kids the right way to do it, because once it's easy.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about prevention. So we just talked about how to remove one. What can we do to help prevent ticks, both chemically, and I'd also like to know about options that are not chemical, if possible, just because a lot of those are toxic to cats.
Sure. So chemical, there's one answer that works and works well, and that's DEET containing mosquito repellents. So that's what I wear when I go out, in the wilds, and that's the one thing that's been proven over and over again to work. With regards to natural tick repellents, so a lot of them unfortunately do not work. Some of them work, you know, Kind of, but you can't really rely on it. Our lab manager right now is actually developing, natural tick repellent that she's tested and she has confirmed works. So there are natural solutions out there that are effective, but I'm not sure if the effectiveness of something natural, can ever get up to the level that something like a DEET can, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So there are some other options, like I saw you mention the ultrasonic tick repellent
Mm-hmm.
tool. So that's actually something I'm interested in. I actually have a call with those guys on Monday. Uh, so there are some studies that show that stuff like that works. I think there's also kind of you can do a defense in depth type strategy where you might use something like that and then combine that with a natural repellent. Flea and tick treatments for cats and dogs do work, although they definitely can be toxic and not healthy for some cats, but
Mm-hmm.
they do work. So that's in terms of prevention when you're in areas where you can't control the ticks. If you have a cat who, for instance, goes out in your yard, you can work to reduce ticks in your yard, and that's something that we definitely recommend. So the first thing is keep your grass cut low. So, high grass is where ticks thrive. If you keep your grass cut low, you're seriously going to reduce the amount of ticks. Ticks kind of follow deer and mice around. So just know if you have a lot of deer walking through your yard, or if you have mice walking through your yard, they will be bringing ticks in with them.
Mm-hmm.
There are treatments that you can, do on your yard, like tick treatments. They are chemical. There are some other options, like there's something called tick tubes, where it's cotton balls that have permethrin treated on it, and mice will take that back and put it in their nests, and it basically treats the mice, and all the ticks on them die.
Hmm.
And if not on the mice, then they're not in the yard. So those have been proven to work. That's another option that's out there. So it's definitely possible to treat an area, and make it a lot safer. But if you're going out in the woods or you're going hiking, going out in fields, you will be exposed to ticks. You need to be prepared for that. So the best strategy is wear some kind of tick repellent. If you're comfortable with permethrin or DEET, that's best. Something natural that has been tested and proven is after that. And you can also try things like the ultrasonic tick repellents. So do that. For humans, you want to wear light colored clothing. You want to tuck your socks into your pants, because otherwise the ticks are going to walk right up your pants. If you tuck your socks into your pants, you look a little bit dorky, but it stops the ticks from getting in there, and you can see them walking up your pants and brush them off. And make sure when you come back, for both you and your pet, you do a very thorough tick check and make sure that you're finding any ticks that are there.
Yeah.
So if go through this process, that's the best defense that you can do. And just be aware, like being aware of tick seasonality is one of the biggest things that I've learned, by seeing this data, and it's so applicable to my daily life. Like I know, just based on my area and what time of the year it is, I know how much risk I'm taking by going out into an area where there could be ticks.
Yeah.
So for instance, I'll be much more careful in May and June, for instance, than I will be in August, which is actually the trough in tick season. And I know that once it starts to get really cold out, and most people have seen this and this, I know that I don't really need to worry that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I further back in the comments, I can't find it, but I think Darren asked about possums. Is it true that they are a natural like tick management? I
Oh,
guess.
oh yeah. There's all kinds of animals that eat ticks. So possums eat ticks, chickens eat ticks, certain kinds of birds eat ticks. So you should always encourage any kind of natural critters that will eat ticks into your yard, and they will definitely help. They can't eat all of them. There are, when you have ticks, as you usually have a lot of ticks,
Hmm.
but it's definitely something that can help. you want to have something walking around and hunting them down for you for sure.
Yeah. Darren is asking too, where do ticks typically live? In logs, leaf litter, like their preferred shelter?
Well, so they live in grass and low like low bushes and low like I guess kind of low vegetation.
Mm,
So ticks don't climb very high. They won't go more than a few feet off the ground. So this is one of our most controversial things. Some people swear that they've seen ticks fall out of trees and jump on them.
that's what I've always thought,
Scientifically,
that they like
yeah,
jump out of trees on you.
scientifically, that has been debunked. They don't do that. You might have a random tick that gets blown somewhere sometime, but that's not what they do. So they're going to be in tall grass, and they're going to be living usually like around the base, in the leaf litter or in the grass. And when they're questing, when they're hunting, they're going to be crawled up on a bush or a tall blade of grass, waving their little legs out, smelling for carbon dioxide, waiting for an animal or a person to walk by to grab onto. So that ties into what you can do is keep your grass down low, don't give them anything to climb up on, and keep your yard raked and stuff so that there's nowhere for the ticks to hide over the winter. And at least you can do that to kind of help your home area stay free from ticks.
Yeah. You mentioned the light colored clothing. I didn't realize that. So are they attracted to darker colors, I guess?
No, it's so this is 100% a visual thing. So
Oh, okay.
uh, ticks ticks are just easier to see. Like if you see like a little black dot against a white shirt or white pants, it's much easier. If you're wearing black yoga pants, you're never going to see a tick.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
another thing that you can do that works well, even if you are wearing dark clothing, and this is something that the lab does frequently, is they will use a lint roller
Mm.
to basically just roll their clothes off when they have come back from an area that is full of ticks. So if you look it up on social media, you can see pictures of lint rollers just covered with ticks. So this is a great way to pull them off. If you can get them while they're on your clothes and they haven't burrowed in somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's a good tip. Like having one of those in your car so when you come back from a hike, before you get in your car, like lint roll yourself.
Yep, yep. And I think that would be a little bit hard to do with a furry pet.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing with pets is that because they're furry, it's harder. The ticks are usually going to be under the fur, so it's a
Mm.
lot harder to see them. So you have to be a lot more thorough about it. But for humans, if you prepare yourself with the right clothes and you check quickly, you can usually get ticks before they even get the chance to get on you.
Yeah. Yeah, my little hiking buddy is a black fluffy cat, and it's so hard to check him for ticks because
Yep.
I he's like long-haired, fluffy black, and I'm like I feel like I'm, searching needle in a haystack kind of situation.
Unfortunately, you can't ask a black cat to change into white clothes.
No,
When you're
no, you
hiking.
can't. One thing I do is I use one of those like a flea comb and like comb
Mhm.
through his fur in hopes of like catching it with the comb.
Yep, that's also a great technique, so that's going to catch them if they're crawling around and they're not embedded. But if they're already embedded, that's not going to pull them off, and you kind of want to be careful not to smush it, like we were talking
True.
before. But that's a great
Yeah.
way if you feel something, where it shouldn't be, then you'll know you have to go in with tweezers or a tick remover.
Yeah.
So definitely doing like a flea comb right after you come back from your hike or right after you come indoors before the tick has really had time to embed. That's the sweet spot for doing that technique.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. This has been so great. I've learned a lot. I know you mentioned the website tickcheck.com.
Yep.
So if people go there, what are all the things they can find at tickcheck.com?
So if you go to our website, tickcheck.com, you will find all of our data. So if you're interested in seeing, what different types of ticks there are and what diseases they carry and what percentage of them come back positive when we test them, you can see that.
Hmm.
We have all sorts of resources for Tick identification, everything that we talked about in this show. We have our free Identify My Tick option where you can send us a tick picture and we'll identify it. And of course, if you want to test a tick for Lyme disease, you can go ahead and place your order there. So all you have to do is put in your info, tell us about the tick you found. You can choose to test it for anywhere up to 30 different tick-borne diseases. You just put the tick in a little plastic bag, mail it to our lab, and then within 48 hours after we receive it, you're going to get your test results. And Emily, I believe, does have a coupon code to share with you. So if you guys are interested in that, you will get a exclusive discount on tick testing.
Yes, if you enter the code KittyCatGo, all one word, at TickCheck.com, you'll get 10% off your tick testing order. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing all of your knowledge and expertise. I feel like I need to go back and watch it again later to just absorb it all. It's really interesting. Even though it's kind of gross, it's interesting.
There is surprisingly a lot to know about ticks, and I know far more than I ever thought I was going to know about this subject. So I'm happy to share it. And the important thing is that a little information goes a long way. So just knowing a little bit about the safe way to remove ticks, the likelihood, that a tick that you find carries disease, the fact that the longer it's on you, the higher the risk. Little tips about, how to avoid ticks, share these with people. And, literally sharing one piece of information might be the thing that, saves somebody or their pet from going through tick-borne disease. And that's the goal. That's what we're all about is, sharing this information that can, really save lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you enjoying the Kitty Cat Go Adventure podcast? Let me know by leaving a review. This will help others to find it and hopefully be inspired to get out there, try new things, and go new places with their cat. What questions do you have about adventuring with cats? Or maybe you'd just like to chat with me about what you learned in this episode. Find me on Instagram at KittyCatGoAdventures. You can also screenshot this episode and tag me in your stories so I can see who is listening. I'd love to continue the conversation with you, so find me on Instagram or join our Facebook group, Kitty Cat Go Adventure Team, so you can connect with a whole community of fellow cat adventurers. And as always, you can find the show notes, including all links and resources discussed in this episode at kittycatgo.com/podcast. Until next time, happy adventuring.